2 feet of hardened steel, threaded like a screw, is buried in the tail of nearly every plane in the sky. Most passengers will never know it exists. Most pilots will fly an entire career without laying eyes on it. On a Monday afternoon, it was the only thing standing between 88 people and the Pacific Ocean. It had already failed once before. So why wasn't this fatal disaster prevented? This is the true story of Alaska Airlines Flight 261. Welcome to Tragic Flights. Every tragedy has a story. Every disaster has a cause, and every flight leaves lessons behind. If you never want to miss the stories behind these events, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes of Tragic Flights. Let's begin. Monday, January 31st, 2000, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Alaska Airlines Flight 261 pushed back at 1:37 in the afternoon. A McDonnell Douglas MD 83, tail number N963AS, 8 years old, clear skies. Nothing about the weather that day was a factor. Bound for Seattle, with a stop first in San Francisco, a route Alaska flew every day. Nothing unusual about the plan on paper. 88 people on board, 83 passengers, 5 crew. In the left seat, Captain Ted Thompson, 53, an Air Force veteran with 17,750 flight hours, more than 4,000 of them on this exact aircraft type. Beside him, First Officer Bill Tansky, 57, 2 years from retirement, flying MD-80s for Alaska since 1985. Between them, close to 26,000 hours of combined experience. If any 2 pilots were built to handle a bad day, it was these 2. The jet climbed out normally, leveling off toward its cruising altitude of 31,000 feet, then passing through 23,400 feet, a warning light nobody wanted to see. Autopilot trim. Somewhere behind them, the horizontal stabilizer, the wing-shaped piece on the tail that keeps a plane's nose level, had simply stopped responding. Thompson disconnected the autopilot. Tansky pulled the checklist. Standard procedure said this was a minor issue, an electric motor maybe, seizing up. They had no way of knowing yet that the problem wasn't electrical at all, and they were about to spend a long, frustrating stretch finding out exactly how wrong that assumption was. For the next 2 hours, Thompson and Tansky worked the problem exactly the way they'd been trained to. Test the primary trim motor, try the backup, cycle the autopilot out, then back in. Run the checklist a second time, then a third. Nothing brought the stabilizer back. 90 minutes in, they still didn't have an answer. The jet droned on, level, apparently fine to anyone in the cabin who didn't know better. At 3:49 p.m., they finally radioed Alaska's maintenance base in Seattle. Jammed stabilizer, they reported. Possible diversion to Los Angeles. Maintenance had no idea why. No known problems with this stabilizer, they said. Down in Seattle, dispatch pushed back. San Francisco was the plan. Stick to the plan. Thompson didn't. He'd be passing Los Angeles any minute. San Francisco was still nearly 100 miles further up the coast. On an airplane he no longer fully trusted. Los Angeles controllers cleared him straight in. Thompson said no. He asked to hold out over open water instead, so he could test how the jet handled at low speed. If it all went wrong, he wanted it to go wrong over the Pacific, not over somebody's neighborhood. He opened the cockpit door and briefed a flight attendant himself. Get everyone seated. Everything secured. He was about to unload the airplane and see if that freed the stabilizer up. By now, the force it took just to hold the nose level was pushing him toward the limit of what one man's arms could manage. There was only one option left on the checklist. Try the primary trim motor one more time and see if it broke the jam loose. They had no idea which direction the tail would move once it let go. At 4:09 p.m., the jam broke. The stabilizer suddenly freed, snapped hard toward nose down. The MD-83 tipped into a dive steep enough to feel nearly vertical. In 80 seconds, it fell from 31,000 feet to under 24,000. Inside the cabin, oxygen masks dropped automatically. Loose bags and service carts slid forward. For 80 seconds, 88 people had no way of knowing if this was how it ended. Thompson and Tansky hauled the nose back up. It held just above 23,700 feet, a little over a mile lower than where they'd started. We have a jammed stabilizer, and we're maintaining altitude with difficulty, Thompson radioed. His intention was to land in Los Angeles. With the dive arrested, they moved to the next item on the list. Get the airplane ready to land. Slow it down. Lower the flaps and slats along the wings, exactly the way every MD-80 crew does on every single approach, thousands of times a day, worldwide, without incident. Lowering the flaps changes how the air pushes against the tail. More lift back there. More load on whatever was still holding that stabilizer in place. Neither pilot had any way of knowing just how little was left holding it. The added load was too much. Whatever thin connection had survived the first dive gave way completely. The tail pitched, and this time, nothing was left to catch it. The MD-83 rolled over and dropped toward the ocean at 70 degrees nose down. Some pilots would have kept fighting to force the nose back up. Thompson knew that wasn't working, so he tried something else. He pushed further into the dive and rolled the aircraft along with it. "Push, push, push and roll," he called out. It was a wild, split-second piece of flying, using the roll itself to drag the nose back toward level. For a moment, upside down over the Pacific, it actually worked. A SkyWest pilot flying nearby watched it happen and radioed it in. "Flight 261 was inverted," he said, "and it looked almost stable. Almost." They'd bought themselves a few seconds. They didn't have any altitude left to spend them. The engines, straining against the altitude, began to surge and stall. "Ah, here we go," Thompson said. It was the last thing the recorder ever caught. At 4:21 p.m., Alaska Airlines Flight 261 hit the Pacific Ocean roughly 14 miles off the California coast, between Port Hueneme and Anacapa Island. All 88 people aboard lost their lives. Navy submersibles found the wreckage over 600 feet down, scattered across a debris field the size of a football field. Both black boxes came up within the week. Roughly 85% of the aircraft eventually followed. Recovering and identifying everyone on board took months. Alaska retired the flight number afterward. There would never be another Flight 261. The ocean had the wreckage. It didn't have the answer. The answer had been sitting in a filing cabinet in Oakland, California for over 2 years. Investigators leaned on the jackscrew, the 2-foot rod of hardened steel we talked about at the start. It threads through a smaller ring called an Acme nut, and together they tilt the horizontal stabilizer up or down. That's how a pilot trims the nose without wrestling the control column for an entire flight. Most people have never heard of either part. Most never will. So, how could a single worn piece of metal bring down an entire passenger jet? The Acme nut is bronze, deliberately softer than the steel screw it grips. It's designed to wear out first, on purpose, so it can be swapped out before the harder, pricier steel ever takes any damage. It didn't happen all at once. That bronze nut had been wearing down for years. A little more with every flight, because it wasn't getting greased often enough to keep up. None of that was visible from the cockpit. All Thompson and Tansky ever saw was that warning light back at 23,400 feet, and a trim system that had stopped responding. With most of its threads already gone, the nut still had just enough grip left to jam rather than fail outright. That's why the plane didn't fall out of the sky the moment that light came on. That's why they got 2 hours to fight it, not 2 seconds. Then, at 4:09 that afternoon, it finally forced itself loose. What had actually happened was the already worn threads of the bronze knot were tearing away the last thread holding the nut onto the screw, the same way the last thread on a stripped bolt finally gives out under load. Except this bolt was holding up 88 people. The moment it let go, so did the airplane. One thin connection was still holding on after that first dive. Lowering the flaps to prepare for landing put more weight on it than it had left to give. That's what finally took the airplane down for good. Which means the whole system ran on one condition. Somebody keeps it greased and somebody keeps checking it. That condition already had a bad history. This exact jackscrew design first flew in the 1960s. Within a couple of years, engineers were already finding assemblies worn far more than expected and had to add mandatory inspections that weren't originally required at all. The industry learned that lesson once. Then, slowly, it started to forget it. Through the 1980s and 90s, Alaska Airlines asked the FAA for permission to stretch the time between jackscrew lubrications. 4 separate extensions, approved with barely any airline-specific data behind them. By 1996, the interval had grown from 500 flight hours to 2,550. Other carriers flying the same jet lubricated theirs as often as every 500 hours. 5 times more often than Alaska. The inspection meant to catch wear before it turned dangerous, stretched even further, out to 9,550 flight hours. Well past the manufacturer's own 7,200-hour recommendation. There's a smaller detail buried in the maintenance logs too. In December 1997, Alaska switched the jackscrew's grease to a newer type, Navy investigators later found traces of the old grease still mixed in with the new. Two products that were never meant to combine. On paper, every one of these extensions was legal. In practice, nobody was watching that bronze nut anywhere near as closely as the design ever assumed they would. And 2 years before Flight 261 ever left the ground, one mechanic already knew exactly how bad that gap had become. September 27, 1997, Alaska's maintenance facility in Oakland, California. Lead mechanic John Liotine measured the wear in N963AS's jackscrew assembly. It was right at the edge of what was allowed. He recommended pulling the whole thing and replacing it. A second mechanic ran another test, found it just barely within limits. Liotine's call got overruled. The worn part stayed on the plane. It would keep flying for 2 more years. The following year, Liotine went straight to the FAA, alleging that supervisors at Oakland were signing off on maintenance that had never actually been done. Federal agents raided the facility on December 22, 1998, and seized records. A grand jury opened a criminal investigation. By August 1999, 5 months before the crash, Alaska had placed Liotine on leave. The company called him disruptive. On September 24, 1999, a mechanic in San Francisco performed what turned out to be N963AS's final jackscrew lubrication. NTSB records show the job should take about 4 hours. This one took about 1. Testimony after the crash revealed Alaska's MD-80 fleet had suffered 3 separate stabilizer trim failures in the 7 months before Flight 261 went down. Nobody grounded the fleet. Nobody widened the search. 3 days after the crash, Alaska's own internal maintenance tracking system finally flagged the jackscrew and told the fleet to check it. The plane's next scheduled jackscrew inspection was about 5 weeks away. Nearly 3 years later, the NTSB revealed the probable cause. Loss of pitch control from the in-flight failure of the jackscrew's bronze Acme nut threads worn away by insufficient lubrication. Contributing factors: Alaska's extended lubrication and inspection intervals, both approved by the FAA. The MD-80 had no backup, no failsafe. If that bronze nut let go completely, nothing else was ever designed to catch it. Within days of the crash, the FAA ordered every operator of the type, nearly 1,100 aircraft, to inspect their jackscrews inside 72 hours. 2 more worn bronze nuts turned up, both on Alaska jets. A grand jury spent nearly 2 years on Alaska's maintenance practices before federal prosecutors filed no criminal charges. Alaska settled Liotine's lawsuit for roughly $500,000. He left the company he'd tried to warn for their fight to save that airplane. Thompson and Tansky were posthumously awarded the Airline Pilots Association's Gold Medal for Heroism, the union's highest honor. The paperwork finally got fixed. 88 families were left living with everything that paperwork had already cost them. For a moment, take away all the mechanics and technicalities. Flight 261 was just 88 people who thought they were flying home. More than a third of them worked for Alaska Airlines or its sister carrier, Horizon Air, or loved someone who did. Liana Ost was 30, just 4 months back from maternity leave at Alaska Airlines' San Francisco ticket counter. She was flying home with her husband Bob, their 4-month-old daughter Emily, her mother Jean Permison, and Jean's longtime companion Charles Russell. They had traveled to Mexico to celebrate Jean's 73rd birthday. 3 generations of one family were on that flight. None of them came home. Pastors Linda and Joe Knight were flying back from mission work in that same city. Their son said afterward that they'd always talked about wanting to go together someday. Flight attendant Kristen Mills, 26, kept an apartment in Seattle for one reason. It was the only way to work the job she loved. Thompson left behind a wife, Marilyn, and a grown son. Tansky, married 30 years, had promised his wife Bonnie quiet afternoon walks in retirement. He was 2 years out. Neither man made it back home. Alaska Airlines and Boeing eventually settled with the families rather than take it to trial. In the days after the crash, families and friends gathered on the beach at Point Mugu and tossed flowers into the water. 3 years after the crash, a bronze memorial rose at Port Hueneme, California, a sundial carrying 88 names, built so that every January 31st, at 4:22 in the afternoon. Its shadow falls directly across the plaque. 25 years on, families still gather there each winter to watch it happen. Rest in peace to all 88 souls aboard Alaska Airlines Flight 261. If this story moved you, make sure to share it, leave a like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tragic Flights.